Good evening, dear traveler of the twilight hours. Welcome to this long journey we're about to take together. A journey that will carry us through the entire night, across continents and centuries, up the slopes of the most sacred peaks our world has ever known. Tonight, we climb not with our bodies, but with our spirits, ascending 7 holy mountains where gods have made their eternal homes, where the divine touches the earth, where heaven bends down to kiss the stone and snow. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from tonight, as you settle into your bed, your couch, perhaps looking out at your own horizon where mountains might rise, or plains stretch endlessly, or cities sparkle with their own kind of earthbound stars. Wherever you are, you're about to journey far from there. Yet somehow, mysteriously, you'll also journey deeper into exactly where you are. For that is the way of mountains and myths. They take us away to bring us home. Here on Boring Mythology, we tell the old stories in the old way, slowly, gently, letting them unfold like mist, rolling through valleys at dawn. So pull your blankets close. Let your breathing deepen. Feel the weight of your body settling, as we begin our ascent into the realm where stone meets sky, where earth reaches toward heaven, where gods have walked and still walk in the eternal now of story. Close your eyes if you haven't already, and let me paint for you the first glimpses of our journey. Imagine, if you will, standing at the edge of the known world at that liminal hour when day surrenders to night, when the mundane world grows thin and the mythic world begins to shimmer through. Before you stretches a vast landscape that defies the ordinary rules of geography. For tonight, all the sacred mountains of the world exist in one continuous realm, connected by paths of starlight and bridges of cloud. First, there in the western distance, rises a mountain crowned with clouds that glow with an inner light. Clouds that are not merely vapor, but the very breath of immortals. This is Olympus, where marble halls float above the peak, where golden light spills from doorways that open onto infinity, where 12 thrones arranged in a perfect circle hold the powers that shaped the Western world's dreams. You can almost hear, carried on the wind, the faint sound of a lyre, the distant echo of divine laughter, the whisper of conversations that determine the fates of mortals below. Turn your gaze now toward the east, and there, impossibly tall, impossibly perfect, rises a mountain that seems to be made not of rock, but of crystallized silence. This is Kailash, the mountain that is itself a meditation, where Lord Shiva sits in eternal stillness, his eyes closed, his third eye holding the power to unmake and remake the universe with a single glance. Around this peak, the very air seems to dance, seems to hold the rhythm of the cosmic drum, the dance of creation and destruction that never ends, that has been going on since before time began and will continue after time has exhausted itself and curled up to sleep. Further still, across an ocean of dreams, rises a cone so perfect it seems less like a mountain and more like a thought made manifest. Fuji, the sacred, the holy, where the goddess Sengen-Sama dwells in the cherry blossoms that bloom impossibly on its slopes, even in the depths of winter, even under the snow. The mountain itself breathes, inhaling the prayers of pilgrims, exhaling blessings that fall like petals, like snow, like gentle rain on the lands below. And at the center of all things, though center is a strange concept in this landscape that follows the logic of dreams rather than maps, rises Meru, the cosmic mountain, the axis around which all the worlds spin. This mountain goes down as far as it goes up, its roots reaching through the earth to anchor it in the primordial waters below, its peak piercing through the heavens, through dimension after dimension, until it reaches that place where all places become one place, where all times become one time. To the south, wrapped in desert heat that shimmers with visions, stands Sinai, the mountain of the voice, the mountain of the law, where the divine presence descended in cloud and fire, where words were carved into stone by a finger of flame, where the boundary between human and divine grew so thin that a man's face could shine with reflected glory, forcing him to veil himself so others could bear to look upon him. In another direction, for directions here are more suggestions than rules, rises Kunlun, the mountain of immortals where peaches grow that grant eternal life, where phoenix nest in trees of jade, where the queen mother of the West holds court in palaces that exist in 9 dimensions simultaneously, each one more beautiful than the last, each one containing gardens where every flower that has ever bloomed or ever will bloom grows in eternal spring. And there, in the space between spaces, rise the pyramid mountains of the Aztec imagination, mountains built by human hands to echo the cosmic mountains built by gods, steps ascending to platforms where the boundary between earth and sky, between human and divine, between life and death, becomes a doorway, a threshold, a place of transformation where hearts were offered to keep the sun moving across the sky, where blood was the price paid for the continuation of the world. These 7 peaks stand before us now, not separate, but part of one great range, one continuous story of humanity's reach toward the divine's descent toward humanity. Between them flow rivers of starlight, paths of moonbeam, roads of cloud. Birds that are not quite birds, but perhaps thoughts with wings, fly from peak to peak, carrying messages in languages that predate speech, that bypass the mind and speak directly to the soul. The air here smells of pine and snow, of incense and storm, of flowers that bloom above the tree line where no flowers should grow. It smells of ozone from lightning strikes, of mineral cold from ancient ice, of that peculiar clarity that comes only at altitude where the air grows thin and the mind grows strange, and the boundary between self and sky begins to dissolve. You can feel the texture of this place. Rough granite under imagined fingers. Smooth obsidian that reflects not your face, but your dreams. Ice that burns with cold. Marble that holds the warmth of divine presence even in the depths of winter night. There are textures here that have no names in mortal languages. The feeling of clouds when they're still part of the mountain, not yet released to be weather. The sensation of stone that remembers when it was star. The touch of wind that carries the voices of gods. Listen. Can you hear it? The sound this place makes? It's not silence, though silence lives here. It's a kind of music made of wind through peak and crag, of water falling from impossible heights, of snow settling on snow, of stone expanding and contracting with temperature changes so slow they span centuries. It's the sound of prayers whispered in 100 languages, 1,000 languages, languages that were old when the world was young, languages that haven't been invented yet, but already echo here in this place where all times touch. There are drums here, distant, so distant you're not sure if you hear them or feel them. Drums that might be heartbeats of sleeping giants, might be the rhythm of the cosmic dance, might be the earth itself pulsing with life. There are flutes made of wind and hollow stone, strings that are aurora borealis stretched between peaks, voices that are sometimes human, sometimes divine, sometimes the mountain itself, remembering what it was like to be molten, to be seafloor, to be the dream of a god before it became stone. Let us begin our ascent with the mountain that taught the Western world how to dream of gods, but we don't name it yet. First, we must earn the right to speak its name by climbing through its lower approaches, through the olive groves that grow impossibly high on its slopes, their silver-green leaves whispering secrets in ancient Greek, in languages older than Greek, in the tongue that trees speak when humans aren't listening. The path begins in morning mist, though morning here is not a time, but a state of being. The mist tastes of sea salt, For this mountain rises from a land bordered by wine-dark waters, waters that remember when Poseidon first claimed them, when dolphins were new, when ships were dreams in the minds of trees that would become their hulls. Your feet, and you have feet here, though you're lying in your bed, you have whatever form you need for this journey. Your feet find ancient steps carved by pilgrims, worn smooth by centuries of passage. Each step a prayer, each prayer a step higher into the realm where marble breathes and gold flows like water. First, the eagles. They circle overhead. But these are not ordinary eagles. Their eyes hold intelligence that makes you look away. For to meet their gaze too long is to risk seeing yourself as the gods see you. Small, brief, a flicker of consciousness in an ocean of time, yet also precious, unique, a note in a symphony that would be incomplete without you. These eagles carry messages between the peak and the world below, their wings beating out rhythms that encode prophecies that speak of heroes yet to be born, of cities yet to fall, of loves that will reshape the world. Then the air itself begins to change. It grows lighter, not thinner as mountain air should, but lighter in the way laughter is light, in the way music lifts the spirit. It carries scents that shouldn't exist together. Summer honey and winter snow, grape harvest and spring flowers, the salt of tears, both joyful and sorrowful. For this is a place where all emotions exist simultaneously, where the gods feel everything mortals feel, but magnified beyond mortal comprehension. As you climb higher, the olive trees give way to laurels, sacred to one who dwells above. Though we haven't reached the dwelling places yet, these laurels whisper of poetry, of prophecy, of the terrible price of knowledge, of the ecstasy of inspiration. Their leaves, when the wind moves through them, sound like pages turning in books that haven't been written yet, like lyres being tuned for songs that will make grown men weep 1,000 years from now, like the breath of oracles just before they speak words that will topple kingdoms or raise them up. The stone beneath your feet begins to change too. What was rough limestone becomes marble, white marble with veins of gold running through it like frozen lightning, like the circulatory system of the mountain made visible. This marble remembers when it was alive, when it was countless tiny creatures in ancient seas, compressed and transformed by pressure and time into something that could hold divinity, could become thrones and pillars and palaces where immortals walk. Now you begin to hear them, voices carried on the wind, but not voices as mortals understand them. These are voices that bypass the ears and speak directly to the blood, to the bones, to that part of you that remembers when your atoms were forged in the hearts of stars. They speak in harmonies that make mathematics sound like music, that make music sound like the fundamental frequency of existence itself. The path turns, and suddenly you see them in the distance, structures that shouldn't be possible, that follow architectural principles that won't be discovered by mortals for millennia, that violate what mortals think they know about physics. Pillars that grow taller the further away you are from them, that are simultaneously near and far, that exist in more dimensions than the human eye can process. These pillars hold up nothing and everything. They are decorative and essential. They are stone and light, and the idea of support made manifest. Between these pillars, you glimpse halls that retreat infinitely inward, that contain spaces larger than the mountain itself. For this is divine architecture, where inside can be bigger than outside, where up can lead down, where every door opens onto exactly where you need to be, even if you don't know where that is yet. The throne room. For now, we begin to approach the first of the throne rooms. Though throne room is too small a word for what this is, the throne room emerges from the mist like a thought becoming real. It is circular, or perhaps it is square, or perhaps it is a shape that contains both circle and square, and all the shapes between them. Around its perimeter stand 12 thrones, each one unique, each one a masterpiece that would drive mortal artists mad with its perfection. Each one empty and full simultaneously, waiting and occupied, for the gods are always here and always elsewhere, always present and always absent. The first throne we approach is the highest, though height here is negotiable, malleable, dependent on perspective. It is carved from a single piece of sky, solid sky, sky that has been convinced to hold still long enough to become furniture. Lightning plays constantly around its edges, not striking, but caressing, like pets that remember their master even when he's away. This throne holds the memory of every storm that has ever been or will ever be, every moment when sky and earth meet in violent illumination. When you stand before it, and you must stand, for to sit would be to claim sovereignty over all existence, you can feel the weight of kingship, the terrible burden of being the one who must decide, who must judge, who must hold the balance between order and chaos. Near it, another throne, this one carved from crystallized sea foam, from the moment when wave becomes air. When water reaches so high, it forgets its water and tries to become cloud. Peacock feathers that are actually frozen light fan out behind it, each eye in each feather a window into a different realm, a different possibility, a different way the world could have been ordered. This throne remembers every marriage, every union, every moment when two become one yet remain two. the eternal mystery of connection that maintains separation. As we move around the circle, and it takes time, for each throne demands contemplation, demands that we understand not just its form, but its function, its meaning, its weight in the cosmic order. We find a throne that seems to be made of shadows given substance. Shadows that move even in stillness, that reach out with fingers of darkness, not to grasp, but to understand, to know the shape of things by the shape of their absence. This throne knows every secret passage, every hidden realm below the earth, every place where the dead walk, where gold grows like fruit on trees of stone, where the roots of the mountain reach down to drink from rivers that flow with forgetting. Another throne burns without being consumed, made of bronze that holds the heat of every forge that has ever burned or will ever burn. Every moment when metal becomes tool, becomes weapon, becomes art. The air around it shimmers with potential, with the possibility of creation, of transformation, of taking what is and making it into what could be. To approach this throne is to feel your own creative fire stir, to remember that you too are a maker, a shaper, a bringer of new things into being. Here stands a throne of woven wheat and vine, where grape and grain intertwine in patterns that tell the story of cultivation, of the moment when humanity stopped merely surviving and began to thrive. This throne pulses with life, with growth, with the green force that pushes, shoots through stone, that turns seed to harvest, that makes the earth generous with those who know how to ask properly. Around it, the air smells of bread baking, of wine fermenting, of the feast that never ends, where hunger is unknown, not because there is no appetite, but because satisfaction regenerates as quickly as desire. We pause before a throne that seems to be made of crystallized music, of harmonies made solid, where every surface sings when light touches it, where the act of looking becomes an act of listening. This throne remembers every song that has ever moved a heart, every poem that has ever captured truth in words, every moment when mortal voice has reached toward immortal beauty and, for just an instant, touched it. The throne itself is warm, not with physical heat, but with the warmth of inspiration, that fever that takes poets and makes them speak words they didn't know they knew. Another throne seems carved from a single pearl, but a pearl the size of a room, iridescent, showing colors that don't have names, that won't have names until humans evolve new ways of seeing. This throne holds the memory of every birth, every emergence from sea to land, every transformation from one state to another. It remembers when love was new, when beauty first recognized itself in the mirror of another's eyes, when desire invented itself out of the space between two beings who suddenly realized they were not complete alone. As we continue our circuit, we find a throne of silver that reflects not images, but possibilities, showing not what is, but what could be. This throne moves even when still, for it exists in a state of perpetual hunt, perpetual pursuit, always on the edge of catching something that must not be caught too easily. For the chase itself is the point. The pursuit itself is the purpose. Around it, the air smells of forest, of moon on leaves, of the moment just before the arrow flies, when everything is potential, nothing yet decided. Here, a throne that might be made of smoke or mist, or the memory of smoke and mist, constantly shifting, never quite solid, never quite gone. This throne knows the speech of serpents, the healing power of poison properly applied, the wisdom that comes from walking between worlds, from being neither one thing nor another, but something more complex, more complete. To look at this throne too long is to begin to see the patterns that underlie patterns, the code beneath the code, the language in which reality writes itself. A throne of iron that has never known rust, iron that fell from the sky as a burning star, iron that remembers the forge at the heart of creation, where elements were first separated from the primordial unity. This throne radiates strength, not the brittle strength of rigidity, but the flexible strength of steel, the strength that bends but doesn't break, that knows when to yield and when to stand firm. Around it, the air tastes of blood and honor, of the moment when conflict becomes necessary, when peace must be defended with war. Another throne seems to be woven from wings, from feathers of birds that exist only in the border between sleeping and waking, birds that carry messages between the conscious and unconscious, between the mortal and divine. This throne never quite stays still, always adjusting, always rebalancing, as if it exists in a perpetual state of arrival and departure, of greeting and farewell. It knows the weight of words, the way a message can change everything or nothing depending on how it's delivered, when it arrives, who speaks it, and who hears. And at the last, a throne that seems to be made of crystallized time, of moments frozen and layered like geological strata, showing the history of everything that has led to this moment, this eternal now, where all the gods are always gathering, always in council, always deciding the fate of worlds. This throne remembers when the cosmos was young, when the first words were spoken that separated light from darkness, when the fundamental forces were given their roles and told to play them, until the end of all things. The air shifts. Where before it carried the brightness of Greek sun, the clarity of Mediterranean light, now it thickens with something older, something that predates the very idea of gods having human forms, human concerns. The marble beneath your feet becomes stone of a different kind, stone that has never been carved, because it emerged from the earth already perfect, already complete, already holy. You're walking now through a landscape that transitions without boundaries, where Olympus doesn't end so much as transform, where the olive trees become rhododendrons without you noticing the moment of change, where the eagles become lammergeiers, those bone-breaking birds that fly higher than any other living thing, that dance on winds that would freeze mortal blood, that see the curvature of the earth and think nothing of it, because they have always known the world is round, have always lived where the flat earth curves into sky. The first thing you notice is the sound, or rather, the absence of sound that is itself a kind of sound. This is the silence that exists before thunder, the pause between heartbeats, the moment when the universe inhales and holds its breath. But within this silence, if you listen with more than your ears, you can hear it. A rhythm that might be a drum, might be a heartbeat, might be the mountain itself, pulsing with a life that transcends biological life, that exists in the realm where matter and consciousness are not separate things, but different expressions of the same fundamental reality. Before you see the mountain, you feel it. It pulls at something in your chest, not your physical heart, but something behind your heart, something that remembers when you were not separate from everything else, when you were part of the great dance that spins atoms and galaxies with the same fundamental gesture. This pull doesn't draw you forward, so much as draw you inward, making you aware of depths within yourself you didn't know existed. Caverns of consciousness that spiral down and down until they emerge on the other side of everything. The path here is not carved, but worn. Worn by the feet of pilgrims who have been walking this route since before history began recording such things, since before humans had languages complex enough to explain why they felt compelled to walk toward this perfect peak that rises like a meditation-made stone. Their footsteps have left more than marks in the earth. They've left intentions, prayers, hopes, fears, all the human emotions that drive people to seek the divine, to walk until their feet bleed, to climb until the air grows thin, to push beyond the boundaries of the possible in search of something that might not exist, but must be sought anyway. The mountain reveals itself slowly, like a thought forming in the mind of God. First, you see snow that seems to glow with its own inner light. Snow that has never melted because it exists in a state beyond temperature, where cold and heat are irrelevant concepts. This snow doesn't fall from the sky, but manifests from the marriage of earth and heaven, from the place where matter becomes so pure, it forgets its matter and tries to become light. Then the shape emerges, a perfect pyramid, but perfect in a way that human geometry can't quite capture. Perfect in a way that makes all other mountains look like rough drafts, failed attempts to achieve this ideal form. 4 faces, each one facing a cardinal direction, each one telling a different story about the nature of existence, each one reflecting a different quality of the divine consciousness that sits at its peak in eternal meditation. The southern face, which you approach first, is dark stone that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. Stone that contains the memory of the void before creation, the pregnant darkness that held all possibilities before the first word was spoken, that began the dance of existence. To look at this face is to confront the fundamental mystery of why there is something rather than nothing. To feel the weight of existence itself, the terrible, beautiful burden of being. As you walk the Kora, the circumambulation that pilgrims have walked for millennia, you begin to understand the rules of this place. Time moves differently here. A single step can contain lifetimes. A lifetime can pass in a single breath. The mountain exists in all times simultaneously. It is ancient beyond measure and freshly born in each moment. It is dying and being reborn with every pulse of the cosmic heart that beats at its center. The very air here teaches you how to breathe differently. Not the shallow chest breathing of lowland life, but the deep belly breathing that draws in not just oxygen, but prana, that life force that animates all things. Each breath becomes a meditation, each exhalation a release of everything you thought you were, each inhalation a receiving of everything you might become. You see, scattered along the path, stones stacked in impossible configurations, each stack a prayer made physical, a hope given form. These stones defy gravity not through divine intervention, but through faith, so pure it convinces gravity to make an exception, to allow these monuments to human devotion to stand when they should fall, to reach toward the sky when they should tumble to earth. The mountain above you doesn't just rise, it dances, though it appears still to ordinary sight. If you look with the kind of vision that comes from walking too long at altitude, from breathing air too thin for comfort, from pushing past the edge of exhaustion into that strange clarity that lies beyond, you can see it. The mountain is dancing, the dance that creates and destroys universes, the dance that spins electrons around nuclei, that spins planets around stars, that spins galaxies around mysterious centers that might be nothing more than the footfall of this eternal dancer. On the eastern face, as you continue your clockwise journey, the stone is lighter, catching the first light of dawn, even when the sun is at zenith, even in the depths of night. This face remembers every beginning, every first moment, every emergence from potential into actual. Here, the rock face shows patterns that might be natural, might be carved, might be written in a language that predates symbol and meaning, that speaks directly to the part of you that existed before you learned you were separate from everything else. The rules of this place continue to reveal themselves. Water flows upward here when it needs to, not in defiance of physical law, but in accordance with laws that supersede the physical, laws that govern the movement of consciousness through the vessels of reality. Streams that should tumble down instead spiral up, carrying prayers toward the peak, where they evaporate into clouds that will carry those prayers to wherever prayers go when they've been properly offered. Birds fly backward here when the wind is right, not backward in space, but backward in time, carrying messages from futures that haven't happened yet to pasts that are still deciding what they want to become. These birds, ravens mostly, but ravens with eyes that hold too much intelligence. Ravens that might be bodhisattvas taking a break from human form. These birds know your name, not the name you were given, but the name you earned, the name written in the script of your actions, the name that tells the true story of who you are when no one is watching. The northern face of Kailash presents itself as you continue your sacred circuit. And here, the stone is gold, not painted gold, not reflecting golden light, but actually gold. Stone that has transcended its stony nature and become precious, not through rarity, but through purification, through millions of years of holding still while the universe danced around it. This face looks toward the vast plateaus of Tibet, toward landscapes so empty at their full, so barren they teem with invisible life, so harsh they become paradoxically gentle in their honest hostility to human comfort. Here, prayer flags flutter in winds that shouldn't exist, for you are in the lee of the mountain, sheltered, yet the flags dance and snap as if in a gale. But listen, the sound they make is not the sharp crack of cloth in wind, but something softer, like whispers, like secrets being told by the mountain to the sky, like love letters written in color and movement rather than words. Each flag carries a prayer, but not prayers of asking, prayers of offering, prayers that give rather than take, that add to the sum total of goodness in the universe without expecting anything in return. The path here is lined with money stones carved with syllables that contain entire philosophies in their curves and lines. Om Mani Padme Hum, they say, but they say it in ways that make each repetition new. Each stone a different interpretation of what it means to find the jewel in the lotus, to discover that the thing you've been seeking has been within you all along, waiting not to be found, but to be recognized. You pause. You must pause. For the body, even in imagination, needs rest. And in your pausing, you notice what you couldn't notice while moving. The mountain is breathing. Long, slow breaths that take geological ages to complete. Breaths that move not air but time itself. Inhalations that draw in the prayers and sufferings of all beings. Exhalations that release blessings and peace. If you synchronize your breathing with the mountain's breathing, and this is dangerous, for to breathe with the mountain is to risk forgetting you are not the mountain. You begin to feel the weight and lightness of eternal existence. The burden and freedom of being conscious in a universe that might or might not be conscious itself. Fragment sentences now. The mind breaking apart. Not breaking badly, breaking like light through prism. Becoming spectrum. Each thought a color. Each color a thought. The mountain teaching through confusion, through dissolution, through the spaces between thoughts where truth lives, the western face. Last face. Completing the circle that is not a circle. Stone here the color of sunset, of ending that is beginning, of death that is transformation. The stone here warm to the touch, even in winter, even in the killing cold that descends when the sun abandons this altitude. Warm with inner fire, with the memory of when all this was molten, when the earth's blood ran liquid and red, when mountains were born in violence that was also creation. Here you find the cave, not find, are led to, are allowed to approach. The cave where he sits, where he has always been sitting, where he will always be sitting. The cosmic dancer in stillness, the destroyer who creates through destruction. The paradox that resolves all paradoxes by refusing to resolve. You don't enter, cannot enter. The cave mouth is doorway to mysteries that would unmake you, would remake you as something you're not ready to become. But you can see in, just far enough, just deep enough, to glimpse the figure in lotus position, ash-covered, snake-wreathed, third eye closed, and thank all the gods it's closed, for when it opens, worlds end, universes collapse back to the point before beginning. Everything returns to the pregnant void, waiting to be born again. But even with eyes closed, the regular eyes, the eyes that see only what is, even closed, you feel seen, known, not judged, but witnessed. Every secret, every shame, every small beauty you've created when no one was watching. All seen, all accepted, all part of the dance even when you thought you were sitting still. The drum, you hear it now clearly, not outside, but inside, in your chest. The damaru, the hourglass drum that sets the rhythm of existence. Lub-dub, create, destroy. In, out, yes, no. The binary code of reality tapped out in sound that predates sound, that creates the possibility of sound, that will continue after the last ear has stopped listening. Around the figure, around Shiva, for now we can name him, having earned the right through our approach. Around him, the walls of the cave show not paintings, but memories. The mountains' memories of when it was seafloor, of when it was pushed up by the collision of continents, of the first humans who saw it and knew it was holy without knowing what holy meant, of every pilgrim who died trying to reach this place, of every prayer offered, every tear shed, every moment of transcendence achieved by someone who pushed past human limitation into something larger. The snakes that coil around his arms and neck are not separate beings, but extensions of his consciousness, exploring the cave, exploring the mountain, exploring the universe through serpentine investigation. They taste the air with tongues that can detect the flavor of thoughts, the scent of intentions, the texture of souls. One of them turns toward you, not its head, but its attention. And in that moment of being noticed by divinity's extension, you understand something about your own divine nature, something that can't be put into words, because words would make it smaller than it is. The goddess is here too, though not visibly. Parvati, the mountain's daughter, the mountain itself given feminine form, the power without which even Shiva is just potential without expression. She is the stone you stand on, the air you breathe, the path that brought you here. She is the possibility of arrival, the permission to approach, the protection that keeps you from dissolving entirely into the overwhelming presence of undiluted divinity. Together, they create the world through their tension, their dance, their eternal romance that is sometimes tender, sometimes terrible, always transformative. The mountain is their child and their parent, their home and their body, their meditation cushion, and their dancing ground. As you back away from the cave, and you must back away, for to turn your back would be disrespectful, dangerous, would break the spell that allows you to be here at all. You notice how the mountain's presence follows you, not pursuing, but accompanying. You carry a fragment of its stillness with you, a seed of its silence, an echo of its eternal dance. The path leads down now, but not descending so much as transitioning. The rhododendrons begin to change, their leaves becoming broader, their flowers shifting from Himalayan purple to something more delicate, more Japanese. The air, still thin, takes on a quality of island atmosphere, of ocean proximity, of volcanic soil rather than continental uplift. You are walking, without knowing quite how, from one sacred mountain to another, from Kailash to Fuji, from the mountain that is the center to the mountain that is the perfect gesture, from the place where God dances in stillness to the place where stillness itself becomes divine. The environment shifts like watercolor bleeding into new forms. Where the harsh beauty of Tibet commanded awe through its severity, here emerges something that commands through perfection of form, through a beauty so complete it seems less like nature and more like nature's idea of itself. The very air becomes silken, carrying moisture from seas that surround this island mountain, this singular expression of Earth's desire to create something perfect. Before you see the mountain, you see its influence. Every tree, every stone, every stream has arranged itself in relation to this central presence. Not consciously, but the way iron filings arrange themselves around a magnet, the way planets arrange themselves around a star, the way thoughts arrange themselves around an idea, too large to think directly. The landscape doesn't lead to Fuji so much as emerge from it, radiate from it, exist in constant conversation with it. The first glimpse comes not of the mountain itself, but of its reflection. In a lake so still it seems solid, so clear it seems like air. You see the perfect cone inverted, pointing down into depths that might be water, might be sky, might be the liquid boundary between worlds. This reflection is not passive, but active. Not copy, but complement. The mountain above reaches toward heaven. The mountain below reaches toward the deep places where dragons sleep, where the foundations of islands rest on the backs of cosmic turtles, where the roots of existence drink from waters that existed before the separation of elements. A torii gate stands at the threshold, vermilion against green, the color of life blood against the color of growth. But this is not just a gateway. It's a statement, a declaration that beyond this point, the rules change. The ordinary becomes sacred. The sacred becomes immediate. As you pass beneath it, and you must duck, not because it's low, but because something in you knows to bow, knows to make yourself smaller in the presence of something so much larger. You feel the shift like pressure in your ears, like the moment before thunder, like the pause before a performer begins. The path here is different from the rough stones of Kailash. These steps are carved from volcanic rock, from the mountain's own body, offered up for the convenience of pilgrims. Each step is worn smooth by millions of feet, each foot adding its own microscopic erosion to the collective sculpture of devotion. The black stone absorbs heat during the day and releases it at night, creating its own microclimate, its own weather system, its own small world where different rules apply. Cherry trees line the path, and here is mystery within mystery. They are always blooming, not just in spring, but in all seasons, in defiance of botany, in accordance with laws that supersede the merely biological. The blossoms fall constantly but never diminish, carpet the ground but never decay, create a path of pink and white petals that feels like walking on clouds, on dreams, on the visual representation of joy itself. The petals make no sound when they fall, but they should. They should rustle, whisper, sigh. Instead, they fall in absolute silence. And this silence is louder than sound, draws more attention than noise, creates a presence through absence that makes you achingly aware of every other sound. Your breathing, your heartbeat, the blood moving through your veins, the thoughts flickering through your mind like candle flames in a gentle breeze. As you climb, the forest changes. The deciduous trees give way to conifers, but not gradually. Suddenly, like walking from one room to another. The temperature drops not with altitude, but with sanctity, as if holiness itself has a cooling effect, as if proximity to the divine requires a certain chill to keep human consciousness from overheating, from burning out like a filament exposed to too much current. Here in the pine forest, everything is vertical. The trees grow impossibly straight, their trunks like columns in a cathedral nature built before humans knew what cathedrals were. Light falls in shafts as if through stained glass windows. But the colors are wrong, are impossible. Purples that shouldn't exist at this time of day. Golds that belong to no sun ever seen. Blues that might be the color of time itself if time had color. Foxes watch from between the trees. Not ordinary foxes, but kitsune, the fox spirits that serve the goddess of this mountain. Their eyes hold intelligence that makes you look away, then look back, then realize they were never there at all, or were always there, and you just now noticed, or are there and not there simultaneously, in the way quantum particles exist in superposition until observed. Their tails, and you count, you can't help but count. Some have 3, some 5. One magnificent creature has 7 tails that move independently like 7 different thoughts in one mind. The path splits, not into 2, but into infinite possibilities, each one leading up the mountains, but through different experiences, different revelations, different aspects of the same truth. The path you choose, or the path that chooses you, winds through a grove where every tree trunk has been wrapped in white paper, in Shimenawa rope, marking them as sacred, as Yorishiro, where Kami might descend, might rest, might whisper secrets to those who know how to listen with more than ears. The very atmosphere here thrums with presence. Not a single presence, but thousands, millions. The Kami of every stone, every tree, every drop of water that flows down from the snowcap. These aren't gods in the Western sense, but something both smaller and larger. The consciousness that lives in all things, the awareness that matter has of itself, the sentence that emerges from complexity, the simple truth that everything is alive if you understand life broadly enough. You come to a station, a resting place. Though rest here is not cessation, but a different kind of movement, a movement inward rather than upward. The station is marked by a shrine, small, perfect, made of wood so old it has transcended wood and become something between plant and stone, something that remembers being a tree but has accepted being architecture, has found peace in its transformation. Inside the shrine, and you can see inside without entering, for the boundaries here are permeable to consciousness if not to bodies, sits a figure that might be statue, might be goddess, might be the mountain itself, concentrated into portable form. This is Sengen-Sama, also called Konohana Sakuya Hime, the goddess who makes flowers bloom on impossible slopes, who tends the fire that sleeps in the mountain's heart, who is simultaneously the mountain's daughter and mother, its lover and sister, its self and other. She is depicted or presents herself, for the distinction between representation and presence is meaningless here, as a young woman of impossible beauty. Not the beauty that attracts, but the beauty that transcends attraction, that makes attraction seem like too small a response. Her kimono is woven from cherry blossoms and snow, from volcanic ash and morning mist, from prayers and promises, from all the hopes of all the pilgrims who have ever climbed this path seeking something they couldn't name but knew they needed. In her hands she holds, but her hands are empty. No, they hold fire. No, they hold flowers. No, they hold the moment of transformation between seed and bloom, between potential and manifestation, between what is and what could be. Your eyes can't quite resolve what she holds, because she holds all possibilities simultaneously. And to see clearly would be to collapse the wave function, to force choice where choice shouldn't be forced. The foxes are here too, carved in stone but alive. In that way, sacred art is alive, more alive than biological life, because it exists outside time, outside decay, outside the entropy that pulls all living things toward ending. These fox guardians hold keys in their mouths, or scrolls, or jewels that might be stars that have agreed to be small for the convenience of sculptors. They watch the shrine and watch you watching the shrine, creating an infinite loop of observation that makes you dizzy if you think about it too long. The goddess speaks, not in words, but in sensations, in the sudden smell of plum blossoms, though no plum trees grow at this altitude, in the taste of sake on your tongue, though you haven't drunk anything, in the feeling of silk against your skin, though you wear rough pilgrim clothes. She speaks in the language of synesthesia, where senses blur and blend, where you might taste colors, or see sounds, or hear the texture of thoughts moving through your mind. What she says, if saying is the right word for this kind of communication, is both simple and infinitely complex. She speaks of beauty as a form of truth, of impermanence as the only permanent thing, of the way Mount Fuji is always becoming itself, never quite arriving at completion, always in process of being the perfect mountain, without ever quite achieving perfection, because perfection would mean stasis, and stasis would mean death. She speaks of the fire that sleeps in the mountain's heart, not destructive fire, but creative fire, the fire that makes new land, new soil, new possibilities. This fire is her father, or her lover, or herself in another form. The relationships between divine beings don't follow human genealogies, human logic, human limitations. The fire sleeps, but dreams, and its dreams become the hot springs that heal pilgrims' aching muscles, become the steam that rises from vents like incense offered to the sky, become the warmth that keeps the cherry trees blooming in defiance of season. The climb continues, must continue. The mountain calls you upward with a pull that is not gravitational but spiritual, not forced but inevitable. You leave the shrine, but carry its presence with you. Carry the goddess's wordless words. Carry the watchful attention of the fox spirits who might be following you, might be leading you, might be you in another form, for the boundaries between self and other grow thin at altitude, grow permeable when you walk in sacred space long enough. The forest thins. Trees become smaller, more twisted, shaped by winds that tell stories of struggle and survival, of finding ways to exist where existence should be impossible. These trees are teachers, showing through their very forms that beauty doesn't require comfort, that strength can emerge from hardship, that sometimes the most profound statements are made by those who have been bent but refuse to break. Above the tree line now, you enter a realm of volcanic stone and snow, black and white, the fundamental duality made landscape. But look closer. It's not truly black and white. The volcanic stone holds colors that have no names, that exist in the spaces between recognized hues. The snow is every color snow can be: blue in shadow, gold in light, pink where it reflects some invisible sunset, green where it remembers being water that knew algae, purple where it dreams of becoming clouds again. The path switchbacks, each turn revealing new views not just of the landscape below, but of the landscape within. For the mountain is teaching you how to see, not just with eyes, but with that organ of perception that exists somewhere between heart and mind, that faculty that recognizes beauty not as decoration, but as information, as the way the universe communicates truths too large for words. You can see now why this mountain has been painted 10,000 times. Why artists have spent lifetimes trying to capture something that can't be captured, that exists not as image, but as experience, as relationship, as the eternal dance between seer and seen. Each painting of Fuji is both failure and success. Failure to capture the mountain's essence. Success in revealing the artist's relationship with that essence. The unique way each consciousness encounters the infinite and returns with its own small piece of the story. The summit approaches, but approaching the summit of Fuji is not like approaching other summits. Here, arrival is less important than approach. The journey doesn't end at the top, but transforms, becomes circular, becomes the understanding that climbing Fuji is not about reaching somewhere, but about becoming something. Something that can only become through the climbing itself. The crater at the top is not absence, but presence. Not emptiness, but fullness. It's a perfectly circular meditation on the relationship between form and void, between something and nothing, between the mountain that is and the space that defines it. To stand at the rim is to stand at the edge of manifestation itself. To look into the place where the earth reveals its liquid heart, where the solid admits it's only temporarily solid, where permanence reveals itself as a particularly slow form of change. The transition from Fuji to Meru is not a journey through space, but through conception itself. The air doesn't change so much as transcend air, becoming something that is simultaneously breath and thought, substance and idea. You're moving now not from one mountain to another, but from a mountain that exists in geography to a mountain that exists in cosmology, from a place you can point to on a map to a place that contains all maps, all territories, all possible ways of organizing space and time into meaningful patterns. Meru doesn't appear. You realize it has always been there. That every mountain you've climbed has been a reflection of Meru, a local manifestation of this cosmic principle that stands at the center of everything while having no fixed location, that rises infinitely. while having specific height, that exists in perfect stillness, while spinning at speeds that would tear ordinary matter apart. This is the axis mundi, the world tree as mountain, the spindle around which all the heavens revolve, the pole star made stone and story. The approach to Meru requires abandoning ordinary consciousness, not losing it, but expanding it until the boundaries between your mind and the cosmic mind become arbitrary, become permeable, become irrelevant. Each step toward this mountain is a step inward. Each moment of ascent, a moment of descent into depths within yourself you didn't know existed. The path spirals, but not simply around the mountain. It spirals through dimensions, through states of being, through levels of reality that stack like transparent sheets, each one containing its own complete universe, each one connected to all the others through this central mountain that is really a principle, an idea, a necessity. The base of Meru rests in waters that are not water, but the idea of water before water learned to be wet. These waters contain all possibilities, all potential forms, all the things that could be, but haven't yet chosen to be. Fish swim here that are more like mobile thoughts than biological creatures. Their scales reflecting not light but meaning. Their movements writing temporary philosophies in currents that flow in directions that don't have names because humans can only perceive 3 dimensions. And these waters move through 17, through 49, through numbers that themselves are still learning how to be numbers. Rising from these waters, the mountain shows itself in layers, each one a different world, a different realm of existence. But these aren't stacked like pancakes, one above another in simple vertical arrangement. They interpenetrate, exist in the same space but different frequencies, like radio stations, broadcasting from the same tower, but on different wavelengths, each one completely present, completely real, completely unaware of the others, except at certain points of interference where they bleed through, where gods visit mortals, where dreams become prophecies, where the impossible briefly becomes inevitable. The first level, if first means anything in a structure that exists outside ordinary sequence, is the realm of the Nagas, the serpent beings who guard treasures that are not gold but understanding, not gems but crystallized wisdom. Their palace winds through the roots of the mountain, and roots is the wrong word because these are roots that go up as well as down, that exist in past and future simultaneously, that draw nourishment not from soil, but from story, from every tale ever told about serpents and wisdom, serpents and temptation, serpents and the shedding of skin that is really the shedding of limitation. Here the air is thick with scale dust that glitters with iridescence that hurts to perceive directly. that must be seen sideways, peripherally, the way you might glimpse truth not by looking at it, but by looking at what it illuminates. The Nagas themselves are present, but not visible, or visible but not present, or both present and visible, but in a way that the human mind translates as absence, as the feeling of being watched by intelligence. So ancient, it predates the division between observer and observed. Moving upward, though upward is a concession to human need for direction, you enter the realm of the yakshas, beings of fertility and abundance who are simultaneously generous and dangerous, who give gifts that transform the receiver in ways the receiver might not survive. Their gardens grow here, gardens where flowers are actually crystallized laughter, where fruits contain not flavor, but memories of perfect summers that never happened but should have, where trees bear leaves that are pages from books that will be written when humanity develops languages complex enough to contain what needs to be said. The yakshas themselves move through their gardens like walking forests, like mobile ecosystems. Their bodies host to countless smaller beings who live in their hair like birds in branches, who make homes in the folds of their skin like insects in bark, who exist in perfect symbiosis because the yakshas understand that abundance means not having more but being more, not accumulating but circulating, not holding but flowing. To meet their gaze, if you're fortunate enough or unfortunate enough, is to feel simultaneously the richness of existence and the poverty of your own limited perception of that richness. The path continues to spiral upward through realm after realm, through the domain of the Gandharvas, the celestial musicians whose songs are not heard but experienced as changes in the fundamental vibration of your being, whose instruments are strung with rays of light and produce notes that exist in the spaces between the notes humans can hear. Their concert never stops, never started, exists in an eternal present that contains all the music that has ever been or will ever be played, each performance unique yet part of an infinite composition that God hums to itself when it thinks no one is listening. Through the realm of the Kinnaras, beings with human heads and horse bodies, or horse heads and human bodies, or combinations that shift depending on who's looking and how they're looking and why they're looking. These are the dancers whose movements create wind patterns that become weather systems, that become the currents that guide migrating birds who carry souls between incarnations. Their dance is mathematics made visible, geometry given rhythm, the abstract principles that govern reality transformed into movement so beautiful it makes observers weep without knowing why. higher still, and the air grows not thinner but thicker with meaning, with significance, with the weight of symbolism made real. You reach the realm of the Devas, the shining ones, whose palaces are built from materialized virtue, whose walls are made of crystallized good intentions, whose windows look out onto views of all the good that has ever been done anywhere by anyone. These beings don't rule so much as demonstrate, don't command so much as exemplify, showing through their very existence what consciousness can become when it releases the illusion of separation, when it recognizes its own divine nature. But even the divas are not the summit. Above them, the mountain continues to rise through realms that human consciousness can only experience as absence, as void. Not because nothing is there, but because what's there is too much for perception to process, too large for conception to contain. These are the formless realms where beings exist as pure consciousness without bodies, as thoughts thinking themselves, as awareness, aware only of awareness itself. The summit of Meru, if summit is the right word for something that exists in all dimensions simultaneously, is not a place, but a state, not a location, but a condition. Here sits Brahma, the creator, but sits is wrong because Brahma is also the mountain, is also the void around the mountain, is also the consciousness reading these words, is also the words themselves. Brahma dreams, and his dreams become worlds, become beings who dream they are separate from Brahma, who forget they are the dreamer dreaming itself into multiplicity. From this summit, you can see, but seeing is not the right word. You can perceive all the worlds arranged around Meru like petals around the center of a flower, like electrons around a nucleus, like thoughts around an idea. Each world complete, each world real, each world convinced it is the only world until its inhabitants develop consciousness sophisticated enough to imagine other worlds, to dream of the mountain at the center. That is not a center, because in infinity, every point is the center. The descent from Meru is not a journey, but an awakening, not a leaving, but a returning to yourself with the knowledge that yourself includes more than you thought, extends further than you imagined, connects to everything else through threads of consciousness that run through the center of this cosmic mountain that exists everywhere and nowhere, that stands perfectly still while dancing at the speed of thought, that is climbing itself in an eternal spiral that never arrives, because arrival would mean the end of becoming, and the end of becoming would mean the end of everything. The transition into Sinai is abrupt, like waking from dream into a different dream that claims to be more real. The cosmic multiplicity of Meru collapses into something starker, more demanding, more insistent on singularity. Here is not the playful plurality of gods, but the terrible, beautiful weight of the one, the unity that precedes number, the silence before the first word, the darkness before let there be light, split existence into the possibility of relationship. Desert. Suddenly, overwhelmingly, desert. Not the absence of life, but life reduced to its essence, stripped of everything ornamental, everything unnecessary, everything that might distract from the fundamental encounter between consciousness and its source. The sand here is not ordinary sand, but the pulverized remnants of earlier worlds, earlier attempts at creation that were spoken into being and then allowed to erode when they proved insufficient to contain what needed to be contained. Each grain carries memory of having been mountain, having been seafloor, having been the stuff of stars before gathering into planets, before cooling into stone, before breaking down into this infinity of tiny mirrors that reflect not light but questions. The heat is a presence, not just temperature, but entity. Something that has weight and will, that presses against you with intentions you can't quite read. This is not the cruel heat of ordinary deserts, but the refining heat of divine proximity. The heat that burns away everything false, everything partial, everything that stands between you and the truth you might not be ready to hear. It makes you thirsty not for water, but for meaning, for purpose, for the kind of clarity that only comes when everything else has been stripped away. You approach the mountain through valleys that wind like questions through the landscape, each turn revealing new aspects of the same fundamental mystery. These valleys have names in languages older than Hebrew, older than human speech, names that are more like mathematical equations than words, that describe not just location, but relationship, not just where, but why. The valley of wandering, the valley of decision, the valley of the shadow. Each one must be traversed, each one teaches through traversal, each one prepares you for an encounter you cannot prepare for. The rocks here bleed color when the sun hits them right, red like the clay from which humans were supposedly formed, gold like the calf that was made when the people grew impatient, black like the char on stone where fire has touched, where something from outside the system has reached in and left its mark. These rocks remember. They remember the footsteps of prophets, the tears of mystics, the blood of martyrs. They remember when the mountain shook, when the mountain burned, when the mountains spoke with a voice that was not voice, but the absence of voice so profound it became communication. Acacia trees grow here, impossible survivors, their roots reaching down through stone to find water that shouldn't exist, their branches reaching up toward sky that burns them even as it sustains them. These are the trees from which the ark was built, the trees that know how to hold holy things without being consumed, that understand the paradox of containing the uncontainable. Their thorns are not defense, but prayer, each one pointing toward heaven, each one sharp enough to draw blood, to remind that approach to the holy requires sacrifice, requires the willingness to be wounded by truth. The path up Sinai is not one path, but many, each one worn by different traditions, different approaches to the same ultimate encounter. The camel path winds slowly, patiently, understanding that haste is impossible when approaching the eternal. The steps of repentance rise steeply, each one requiring decision, commitment, the choice to continue when continuation seems impossible. The hidden paths that only the Bedouin know, that exist more in memory than in physical space, that appear only when needed, when the traveler has proven ready for shortcuts that are not really shortcuts, but different ways of experiencing the same infinite distance. As you climb, the air grows thin, but also thick with presence, with the weight of what happened here, what continues to happen here in the eternal now, where all moments exist simultaneously. You can feel them, the moments layered like geological strata. Moses climbing alone, the elders waiting below, the people growing restless, the mountain wrapped in cloud and fire, the voice that spoke commands that became the architecture of Western morality. The tablets carved not by hands, but by intention itself, by the need for infinite truth to become finite law. You pass the spring where Elijah heard the still small voice, where he learned that God is not in the earthquake, not in the fire, not in the wind, but in the silence after all the noise has ended, in the whisper that can only be heard when you stop trying to hear it. The spring still flows, impossible water from impossible rock, cool and clear, and tasting of something that isn't quite mineral, isn't quite vegetable, but might be the flavor of mercy, of second chances, of the divine preference for redemption over judgment. The chapel of Elijah marks a pause, a chance to rest. But rest here is not recuperation, but preparation. The chapel is small, ancient, built from stones that were already ancient when they were stacked. Stones that might have been part of earlier temples, earlier attempts to create meeting places between human and divine. Inside, the air is cool and dark and thick with centuries of prayer, with the accumulated weight of all the words spoken here in desperation, in gratitude, in confusion, in clarity. The walls hold these prayers like banks hold rivers, channeling them upward, always upward, towards something that might or might not be listening, but is always, always present. Higher now, above the chapel, The path becomes less path and more suggestion, less direction and more invitation. You must choose your own way among the rocks, each choice a small prayer, each step an act of faith that there will be another step, another rock, another moment of continuation. The mountain tests not your strength, but your intention, not your endurance, but your sincerity. It asks with every footfall, why are you here? What do you seek? What are you willing to release to receive what you think you want to receive? The false summit appears first, the place where many stop, thinking they've arrived. But this is the test within the test, the question within the question. Will you be satisfied with almost? Will you accept proximity when presence is possible? The true summit requires passing through the disappointment of false arrival, requires the humility to admit you haven't reached where you thought you were reaching, requires starting again when you thought you were done. And then, suddenly, you are there. The summit of Sinai, the holy ground where Moses was told to remove his sandals, where the bush burned without being consumed, where the tablets were given, where law entered the world as weight and gift and burden and liberation all at once. The ground here is different, not just rock, but something that vibrates at a frequency that makes your bones ache, that makes your teeth taste metal, that makes your heart beat in rhythms that feel ancient, feel coded, feel like language. Here is the place of theophany, the place where the infinite showed itself to the finite, and the finite somehow survived the seeing. But what was seen? Light too bright to be light, darkness too dark to be darkness, something that exists in the space between all opposites, that refuses to be reduced to attributes, to characteristics, to anything that would make it manageable, containable, safe. What was seen was the backside of glory, because the face would unmake the seer, would dissolve the boundaries that allow individual consciousness to exist. The summit is small, barely room for a dozen people, but it contains infinities. It contains every prayer ever prayed by every tradition that holds this place sacred. It contains the moment when monotheism was born, when humanity first conceived of a unity behind multiplicity, a singularity that precedes and transcends the many. It contains the struggle to understand suffering in a world created by benevolence, to reconcile justice with mercy, to hold simultaneously the transcendence and immanence of the divine. Standing here, you can feel the weight of commandments, not as restrictions, but as architecture, as the framework that allows freedom to exist within structure, that creates the possibility of choice by establishing consequences. The commandments were not arbitrary rules. but the operating instructions for consciousness, the user manual for beings capable of both creation and destruction, both love and hatred, both unity and separation. The wind here carries voices, but not human voices. These are the voices of principles, of laws that govern not just human behavior, but the behavior of atoms, of stars, of the thoughts that think themselves in the space between sleeping and waking. These voices speak in languages that predate sound, that communicate through resonance rather than vibration, that enter not through the ears, but through the spaces between cells, between molecules, between the particles that pretend to be solid, but are really mostly empty space. The descent from Sinai is harder than the ascent, because you carry more coming down than you carried going up. You carry the weight of encounter, the burden of having touched something that changes you in ways you won't fully understand for years, maybe lifetimes. You carry questions that are heavier than answers, doubts that are more substantial than certainties, a kind of knowing that makes all other knowing seem partial, provisional, possibly mistaken. The shift from Sinai's stark monotheism to Kunlun's proliferating paradise is like walking from a desert into a dream, from the singular into the infinite multiple, from the weight of law into the weightlessness of transcendence. The air changes from the dry clarity that reveals through reduction to the humid complexity that reveals through abundance, through excess, through the overwhelming generosity of a reality that creates billions of forms just to express one simple truth. Existence enjoys existing. Kunlun doesn't rise from the earth so much as the earth rises to become Kunlun, gathering itself into peaks and valleys that follow patterns that are simultaneously geometric and organic, that obey laws that are simultaneously mathematical and musical. This is the mountain as garden, the garden as mountain, the place where earth and paradise have not yet separated, where the fall hasn't happened, where innocence and wisdom coexist without contradiction. Mists wrap around the lower slopes, but these are not ordinary mists. They are the exhalations of dragons who sleep in the caves that honeycomb the mountain. Dragons who are not creatures but principles, not beings but processes, the living embodiments of transformation itself. Their breath carries the power to transform anything it touches. Stone to gold, mortal to immortal, thought to reality, reality to thought. To breathe this mist is to feel your cells remembering possibilities they forgot they had, to feel your DNA unwinding and rewinding into patterns that might allow you to live forever, if living forever is something you could learn to want. The approach to Kunlun is through gardens that exist in perpetual bloom, where seasons happen simultaneously, where spring and autumn dance together, where summer and winter make love and produce impossible fruits that ripen and flower at the same time. These gardens are tended by the immortals, the Jian, who have transcended death not by avoiding it, but by forgetting to die. By becoming so interested in the moment, they forgot to move forward into aging, into decay, into the entropy that pulls mortal things toward ending. The paths here are made of jade, but jade that is still alive, that still remembers being stone in the earth, that still dreams of the pressure and time that transformed it from the ordinary into the precious. This jade hums with frequency that you feel in your bones, in the marrow where blood is made, where life regenerates itself constantly, where the body performs its quiet miracle of continuation. Walking on these paths is like walking on condensed time, on materialized patience, on the very substance of endurance made solid enough to support your weight. Phoenix nest in trees that shouldn't exist. Trees that bear fruit made of condensed sunlight. Trees whose bark is actually scales, whose leaves are actually feathers, whose roots reach not down into earth but up into sky, drawing nourishment from clouds, from starlight, from the spaces between the visible stars where dark matter dances its invisible dance. These phoenix are not birds, but possibilities, not creatures, but cycles, each one containing the pattern of its own death and rebirth, each one a living demonstration that ending is just another form of beginning. The immortals themselves move through these gardens like walking meditations, like thoughts that have learned to take physical form when it amuses them to do so. They are simultaneously ancient and young, wise and playful, present and absent. To look at them directly is to see nothing special, but to see them peripherally is to glimpse something that makes your heart race with a kind of homesickness for a home you've never known, a longing for a state of being you can almost remember, almost imagine, almost achieve. Here is the palace of the Queen Mother of the West, Xi Wang Mu, she who holds the peaches of immortality, who decides who gets to transcend the ordinary limitations of flesh, who sits at the boundary between the human and divine and manages the traffic between the two realms. Her palace exists in 9 dimensions simultaneously, each one reflecting a different aspect of her nature: fierce protector, gentle mother, terrible judge, generous host, keeper of boundaries, dissolver of boundaries, the paradox that resolves all paradoxes by refusing to be resolved. The peach garden is the heart of Kunlun, where trees that bloom once every 3,000 years bear fruit, that ripens once every 9,000 years, that grants immortality to those who eat it. But immortality here doesn't mean simply not dying. It means remembering what you were before you were born, knowing what you'll be after you die, understanding that birth and death are punctuation marks in a sentence that runs forever, that has been speaking itself since before language existed, and will continue after the last word has been forgotten. The peaches themselves glow with inner light, with the condensed energy of thousands of years of slow growth, of patient accumulation of something that isn't quite chi, isn't quite light, isn't quite consciousness, but partakes of all three. To bite into one is to taste time itself, to feel millennia dissolving on your tongue, to experience the sensation of your cells reorganizing themselves according to patterns that predate aging, that predate death, that remember the original template before entropy was invented. But the peaches are guarded, not jealously but carefully, with the understanding that immortality given too freely comes a curse rather than a blessing. The Queen Mother knows that death gives life meaning, that ending gives stories shape, that limitation creates the possibility of transcendence. So she chooses carefully who receives the fruit, looking not for worthiness, but for readiness, not for deserving, but for the capacity to bear the weight of endless existence. The palace itself defies architecture as humans understand it. Rooms open onto other rooms that shouldn't be adjacent, that exist in different centuries, different dimensions, different states of being. Corridors lead backwards in time. Stairs climb down while taking you up. Windows look out onto views that haven't happened yet, onto landscapes that exist only in the dreams of sleeping mountains. To walk through this palace is to experience space the way music experiences time, as something fluid, flexible, subject to interpretation. In the throne room, if room is the right word for a space that has no walls, no ceiling, no floor, just the suggestion of enclosure without the actuality of boundary, the Queen Mother holds court. She is simultaneously young woman and ancient crone, simultaneously human and tigress, simultaneously one and many. Her throne is carved from a single piece of void, from crystallized emptiness, from the pause between heartbeats made solid. To approach her is to feel yourself becoming less solid, more possibility, as if her presence reminds you that form is just a temporary agreement. Matter makes with itself. Around her dance the immortals who have achieved their state through different means, through alchemy, through meditation, through martial arts, through art, through love, through loss, through the simple accumulation of wisdom that eventually reaches critical mass and transforms into something beyond wisdom. They dance, but their dancing is stillness in motion, stillness moving through space without disturbing it, like fish through water, like thoughts through mind, like light through void. The music they dance to is not heard but felt, not in the ears but in the bones, in the spaces between atoms where the strong force holds everything together while simultaneously holding everything apart. This music is mathematics made audible, the golden ratio given rhythm, the Fibonacci sequence transformed into melody that spirals eternally without repetition, that creates infinite variation from simple rules. Here in Kunlun, the veil between the worlds is not just thin, but absent. Or rather, the veil is revealed to be an illusion, a convention, a polite fiction maintained to keep the different levels of reality from overwhelming each other. Here you can see the dragons moving through their underground rivers, rivers of liquid light that flow upward, that connect the depths of earth to the heights of heaven. You can see the phoenix burning and being reborn in endless cycles that happen in instants that last forever. You can see the immortals who have chosen to become invisible, who walk among humans unrecognized, who intervene in small ways, in crucial moments, who nudge history in directions that create more beauty, more possibility, more openings for transcendence. As the mists of Kunlun fade, as the jade paths become stone, as the phoenix cries transform into eagle screams, you find yourself approaching mountains of a different order entirely. These are mountains built by human hands to mirror cosmic mountains. Pyramids that rise from jungles and deserts, that create their own topography, that insist through architecture that humans too can reach toward the sky, can create the conditions for divine descent, can build bridges between the worlds using nothing but stone and will and blood. The approach to these temple mountains is through landscapes that pulse with a different kind of life, where the jungle doesn't just grow, but seeds, where every surface is covered with something living, where death and life happen so quickly, they become indistinguishable, where decomposition and growth are the same process viewed from different angles. The air here is thick, not just with humidity, but with presence, with the weight of eyes watching from the green darkness, with the consciousness of a landscape that remembers when gods walked openly, when the boundary between human and divine was a door that could be opened with the right keys. Teotihuacan rises first from this green darkness, the place where gods were born, where the sun and moon were created through divine sacrifice, where the pattern was established that would govern Mesoamerican cosmology for millennia. The pyramid of the sun doesn't just reach toward the sky, but creates its own sky, generates its own gravitational field that pulls consciousness upward even as the body climbs the steep steps that were designed not for comfort, but for transformation. Each step a small death, a small resurrection, a practice, run for the greater transformation that waits at the summit. The stones here remember everything. They remember the hands that placed them, the prayers that consecrated them, the blood that sealed them into their positions. But more than that, they remember the cosmic pattern they're imitating, the original mountain that exists in the realm of pure form, the template from which all sacred mountains derive their power. These stones were not just stacked, but woven, creating a fabric of matter and meaning that catches divine attention the way a web catches light, the way a sail catches wind, the way a song catches the heart and won't let go. As you climb, the modern world falls away not gradually, but in discrete steps, each level of the pyramid corresponding to a different layer of time, a different epoch of consciousness. By the time you reach the platform where the temple once stood, where the temple still stands if you know how to see with more than physical eyes, you have traveled not just upward, but backward, inward, to the place where linear time becomes cyclical, where history becomes myth, where myth becomes the only history that matters. The summit platform is a threshold, a place that exists in multiple worlds simultaneously. Here, priests once performed ceremonies that didn't just commemorate cosmic events, but participated in them, that didn't just remember the creation of the sun, but helped create it again, each day, through ritual that was simultaneously symbolic and literal, that understood no difference between the two, because at this height, at this level of reality, symbol and substance are the same thing viewed from different angles. The obsidian knife that opened chests to remove still beating hearts was not instrument of death, but of transformation, not ending life, but delivering it to its next stage, sending it as messenger to the gods who needed constant reminding that humans existed, that the experiment of consciousness continued, that the game of existence was still being played. The hearts were suns in miniature, each one a star that had been burning in a human chest, now offered to keep the great star burning in the sky, to keep the cosmic machinery running, to prevent the universe from winding down into entropy and darkness. From this height, you can see the avenue of the dead stretching below, but it's not an avenue of death, but of transformation, not a path for the deceased, but for the living, who must die to their ordinary consciousness to be born into something larger. The pyramids along this avenue are not tombs, but machines, not monuments, but instruments, each one tuned to a different frequency, each one designed to transform consciousness in a different way, to open different doors in the architecture of awareness. The Pyramid of the Moon rises at the avenue's end, smaller than the Sun Pyramid, but more mysterious, more feminine, more concerned with the hidden than the revealed. This pyramid doesn't reach toward the sky, but draws the sky down, creates a pool of celestial energy that collects in its summit platform like water in a basin, like blood in a chalice, like tears in the cupped hands of someone who has finally understood the price of wisdom. Between these pyramids, the city that once was continues to exist in the eternal now of sacred time. The priests still climb the steps in their jade and feather regalia, their faces painted to become the faces of gods, their bodies moving in patterns that are simultaneously dance and mathematics, simultaneously celebration and cosmic maintenance. The drums still beat in rhythms that synchronize with the heartbeat of the earth, with the pulse of underground rivers, with the oscillation of stars that won't be discovered by astronomers for centuries. The feathered serpent moves through this space. Quetzalcoatl, the union of earth and sky, the marriage of bird and snake, the paradox that resolves the opposition between matter and spirit. He is carved into the temple that bears his name. But the carvings are not representations, but manifestations, not images, but presences. To look at them is to feel the wind that is his breath, to see the undulation that is his movement through dimensions, to understand that wisdom comes from the marriage of opposites, from the refusal to choose between earth and heaven, between body and spirit, between life and death, moving south through time and space that flow like water, like blood, like the sap that runs through the world tree. You come to the mountains of the Maya, where pyramids rise from jungle like thoughts from the unconscious, sudden, overwhelming, undeniable. Tikal's temples reach above the canopy, creating islands of stone in an ocean of green, platforms where humans could stand above the world of growth and decay and touch the realm of the eternal, the unchanging, the mathematical principles that govern the dance of planets, the progression of time, the endless cycle of creation and destruction that the Maya tracked with such terrible precision. Temple 4 rises highest, and from its summit, you can see the curvature of the earth. But more than that, you can see the curvature of time, the way it bends back on itself, the way the Maya knew it would, calculating the end of cycles and the beginning of new ones with accuracy that makes modern computers seem crude. They knew that time was not a line but a spiral, not a river but a wheel, not progress but pattern, endless pattern, beautiful and terrible pattern that repeats with variations, like a song that knows infinite verses but only one melody. The glyphs carved into these stones are not writing as we understand it, but frozen speech, crystallized thought. The Maya discovering that thoughts could be made permanent, that ideas could outlive their thinkers, that wisdom could be transmitted across centuries without distortion, if you knew the right patterns, the right combinations of image and sound and meaning that would survive the entropy that pulls all things toward forgetting. In the jungle between the temples, the howler monkeys scream with voices that sound almost human. That might be the voices of humans who climbed too high, who saw too much, who were transformed by their vision into something between human and divine, between earth and tree, between speech and pure sound. Their cries carry messages that bypass language, that speak directly to the amygdala, to the ancient parts of the brain that remember when we too lived in trees, when we too could read the forest like a book, when we too knew the names of all the gods, because the gods were everything, and everything was God. The cenotes open like eyes in the earth, pupils dilated to see into the underworld, into Xibalba, where the hero twins played ball with the lords of death and won, where corn god was buried and resurrected, where all the myths that matter are still happening, have always been happening, will always be happening in the eternal now that exists at the bottom of these sacred wells. The water in them is not just water, but the tears of the earth, the blood of the rain god, the amniotic fluid of the world's rebirth that happens every dawn, every spring, every time consciousness awakens to itself and remembers what it is. Chichen Itza's pyramid, El Castillo, is a calendar made of stone, a clock that tells not hours but eons, not days but world ages. Each of its steps corresponds to a day of the year, each of its platforms to the months, its entire structure a four-dimensional representation of time made three-dimensional, so humans can climb it, can bodily experience what it means to move through time consciously, deliberately, ritually. At the equinoxes, the shadow of the serpent descends the stairs, Kukulkan returning to earth, the cosmic serpent whose body is the Milky Way, whose movement creates time, whose awakening will end this world and begin the next. Inside the pyramid, for these mountains contain mountains, each temple built over an earlier temple, each age containing all the ages that came before. Inside is the jaguar throne, red painted with cinnabar, which is mercury sulfide, which is the alchemical marriage of liquid metal and burning stone. The impossible union that creates the possibility of transformation. The jaguar's eyes are jade, green like the forest, green like the quetzal feathers that were worth more than gold, green like the corn that is the flesh of humans, that makes humans from earth, that turns soil into consciousness through the alchemy of growth. The ball courts scattered throughout these temple cities are not sports venues, but cosmological theaters, where the game that maintains the universe was played, where the ball was the sun moving through the underworld, where the players were simultaneously athletes and priests, simultaneously competing and cooperating in the great game that keeps the cosmos in motion. The acoustics of these courts create effects that shouldn't be possible, where whispers carry hundreds of feet, where the sound of the ball striking the wall becomes thunder, becomes the voice of gods commenting on the play, becomes the universe applauding its own continuation. Further south still, Copan rises from the Honduran jungle, the Athens of the Maya world, where astronomy and art reached heights that make modern achievements seem partial, limited, constrained by the poverty of imagination that comes from forgetting that consciousness and cosmos are not separate things, but different views of the same fundamental mystery. The hieroglyphic stairway is the longest text in stone in all the Americas. Each glyph a door, each door opening onto vistas of meaning that proliferate endlessly, that refuse to be reduced to single interpretations, that demonstrate that truth is not singular, but plural, not simple, but infinitely complex. The stelae stand like frozen moments of divine time, each one marking not just when, but why, not just who, but how they connected to the great web of meaning that the Maya saw underlying everything. These stone monuments are portraits not just of rulers, but of states of consciousness, of the conditions necessary for humans to become doorways through which divine energies could enter the world, could participate in the maintenance of reality, could ensure that the sun would rise, that the rains would come, that the corn would grow, that consciousness would continue its experiment with itself. And finally, moving through space that is also time, through geography that is also cosmology, you come to the greatest of the Aztec temples, the Templo Mayor in the heart of Tenochtitlan, now buried beneath Mexico City, but still present, still active, still performing its function as axis mundi, as the navel of the world, as the place where the horizontal plane of human existence intersects with the vertical axis of divine descent and ascent. This temple was not built once, but many times, each new construction enveloping the previous one like tree rings, like Russian dolls, like the layers of an onion that when peeled reveal not a center, but more layers, infinite layers, because the center is not a place, but a process, not a location, but a relationship. Each rebuilding was a renewal of the cosmic contract, a re-establishment of the agreement between humans and gods, a reaffirmation that the experiment would continue, that consciousness would keep exploring itself through the multiplicity of forms, through the dance of life and death that needs both partners to continue. The twin temples at its summit, one to Tlaloc, the rain god, one to Huitzilopochtli, the sun god, represent the fundamental duality that drives existence: water and fire, growth and war, the gentle and the terrible, the feminine and masculine principles that must be kept in balance for the world to continue. The priests who climbed these steps carrying hearts still warm from the chest, carrying heads still blinking in surprise, carrying blood that would water the stones and keep them alive. These priests were not madmen, but mathematicians, not killers, but gardeners tending the terrible, beautiful garden of existence that requires pruning, requires sacrifice, requires the willingness to pay the price for consciousness to continue. The blood running down the temple steps was not waste, but irrigation, not ending, but transformation. The recognition that life feeds on life, that existence requires constant investment, that the gods gave their blood to create humans, so humans must give their blood to maintain gods. The circular economy of the sacred that modern consciousness has forgotten has replaced with the linear economy of taking without giving, of receiving without reciprocating, of assuming the universe owes us existence without payment. From the summit of this temple, and you stand there now in the eternal moment that exists outside historical time, you can see all the sacred mountains you've climbed reflected in this one. All the attempts to build a bridge between earth and heaven. All the technologies of transcendence that humans have developed to deal with the fundamental mystery of being conscious in a universe that might or might not be conscious itself. Olympus with its marble halls, Kailash with its dancing stillness, Fuji with its perfect form, Meru with its cosmic centrality, Sinai with its demanding unity, Kunlun with its immortal gardens, all present in this pyramid that is all pyramids, this mountain that is all mountains, this attempt to reach the unreachable that succeeds not by reaching, but by attempting. As it was in the beginning, so it continues in the eternal now, where all these mountains exist simultaneously, where every sacred peak is a different face of the same fundamental reaching, the same impossible necessary gesture of consciousness, trying to understand itself by creating heights from which to see itself, by building platforms for perspective, by climbing towards something that recedes as you approach, because it was never outside you, was always the you that is climbing, the you that is the mountain, the you that is the space between climber and mountains, where the real magic happens. Return now in memory, in imagination, in the part of you that has been traveling while your body lies still. Return to Olympus, where the gods still feast in halls of cloud and marble. But now you see them differently. See them not as separate beings, but as aspects of your own consciousness given form, as the parts of yourself that are immortal, not because they don't die, but because they were never born, that exist in the realm of archetype, of pattern, of the eternal forms that cast shadows we call our daily lives. Zeus's thunder is your own power to decide, to judge, to rule the small kingdom of yourself. Hera's jealousy is your own need for fidelity, for commitment, for the marriage of opposites within yourself. Each god a mirror, each goddess a reflection, each throne a seat waiting for the part of you that already knows how to be divine. The mists part, and Kailash appears again. But now you understand that the mountain that cannot be climbed has already been climbed by the part of you that doesn't need to move to travel, that doesn't need to change to transform. Shiva's dance that you witnessed is your own cellular dance. The constant movement of particles that creates the illusion of solid form. The eternal transformation that maintains the appearance of stability. The drum beats in your chest, has always been beating, will always beat until it doesn't. And then it will beat in another chest, another form, another expression of the same fundamental rhythm that drives everything, from electron spin to galactic rotation. Mount Fuji rises in your inner landscape, perfect cone of aspiration, and you realize that its beauty is not in its form, but in what its form does to you, how it creates in you the recognition of beauty, how it teaches you that perception is participation, that seeing is creating, that the mountain is beautiful because you have the capacity to perceive beauty, and you have the capacity to perceive beauty because beauty needed someone to perceive it, created you to complete itself, to close the circuit of meaning that requires both presence and witness. Meru spirals through all dimensions simultaneously, and you understand now that you too are multidimensional, that the you reading these words is just one slice of a larger you that exists in many worlds, many times, many states of being simultaneously. The cosmic mountain is your own spine, the axis around which your consciousness revolves, the stable center that allows the movement of thought, emotion, sensation to spin their complex patterns without losing coherence, without dissolving into chaos. Sinai burns with the fire that does not consume, and you recognize that fire as your own burning questions, your own need to understand, to receive laws, not because you need to be controlled, but because you need structure to be free, need limitations to transcend, need commandments to discover what lies beyond commandment. The voice from the burning bush is your own voice calling to yourself from a future where you have become what you are becoming, where you have remembered what you pretended to forget, so you could have the joy of remembering. Kunlun's immortal gardens bloom in the part of you that refuses to age, that refuses to accept that consciousness ends with the body, that knows something in you was here before you were born and will be here after you die. Something that doesn't need peaches of immortality because it is the tree that grows them, is the garden they grow in, is the mountain that holds the garden, is the space that holds the mountain. And the pyramid mountains, the human attempt to build sacred peaks, these too are yours, are you, are the part of you that knows you are both human and divine, both mortal and immortal, both the builder and the built. Every sacrifice on those stone altars was your own sacrifice of who you were to become who you are. Your own willingness to let parts of yourself die so other parts could be born. Your own understanding that transformation requires loss, that resurrection requires death, that the new cannot come until the old agrees to go. All these mountains now reveal themselves as one mountain with 7 faces, or 7 mountains sharing one summit, or no mountains at all but elevations in consciousness, platforms of perspective from which you can see yourself more clearly, more completely, more truthfully. The journey up was really a journey in. The ascent was really a descent. The movement through space was really a movement through states of being that exist simultaneously in the same space you occupy right now. Lying in your bed, breathing in the darkness, traveling without moving. The gods you met were always you, wearing masks you created to help yourself understand your own divine nature. The demons you avoided were also you, the parts of yourself you're not ready to integrate, not ready to acknowledge, not ready to love. The paths you walked were neural pathways, patterns of thought that become more established each time you think them, that become the roads through your inner landscape, the ways you navigate the vast territory of yourself. But more than that, these mountains are the collective human attempt to understand something that can't be understood directly, that can only be approached through metaphor, through story, through the physical act of climbing, that becomes a spiritual act of reaching, of refusing to accept that consciousness is limited to the flat ground of ordinary awareness. Every culture has its sacred peaks, because every culture has discovered that height provides perspective, that climbing changes consciousness, that mountains are the places where earth reaches toward heaven, and heaven bends down to touch earth. Now, as the journey completes its circle, as the serpent of story swallows its own tail, as the end becomes beginning, becomes end again, in the eternal cycle that governs all stories, all journeys, all attempts to capture in words what exists beyond words. Let us rest in the understanding that has emerged not from the telling, but from the spaces between the telling, not from the mountains, but from the valleys between them, not from the climbing, but from the pauses where you caught your breath and noticed that breathing is the original sacred act, the first and last prayer, the constant exchange between inside and outside that makes life possible. The dawn that is always breaking somewhere finds you different than the dusk that fell when we began. You have climbed 7 mountains without moving, have traveled the world without leaving your bed, have met gods and goddesses who were always yourself in disguise, teaching you about your own divine nature through the elaborate theater of mythology that is really psychology, that is really cosmology, that is really the single science of consciousness, studying itself through every possible lens. These mountains continue to exist. Olympus still rises from the Grecian plains, wrapped in clouds that hide and reveal its divine inhabitants. Pilgrims still walk around Kailash, wearing paths in stone that are really paths in consciousness, grooves in the universe where the sacred has been recognized so many times. It has worn through the veil between worlds. Fuji still presides over Japan like a perfect thought, a meditation in stone, a teaching about form and emptiness that needs no words. Meru still spirals through dimensions, organizing reality around itself, creating the possibility of center in a universe that has no edges. Sinai still burns with the fire of revelation, the mountain where the infinite touched the finite and left fingerprints in stone, in law, in the human need for meaning. Kunlun still hosts the immortals who dance in gardens where time has different rules, where peaches take millennia to ripen, where death is just a forgetting that can be remembered away. And the Pyramid Mountains still rise from jungles and cities, humanity's attempt to build what nature wouldn't, to create the conditions for divine descent, to insist that if gods won't come to humans, humans will build stairs to gods. But more than continuing to exist, these mountains continue to call. They call to the part of you that knows the flat ground is not enough, that knows there are heights within you that have never been climbed, peaks of consciousness that have never been reached, summits of understanding that await your ascent. They call to the part of you that remembers when you were stone, when you were star, when you were the space between stars, when you were the consciousness, considering whether to become matter, whether to accept the limitation of form for the experience of being form. Each mountain offers its own teaching, its own technology of transcendence. Olympus teaches through personality, through the recognition that the divine is not abstract but personal, not distant but immediate, not perfect but perfectly itself, with all its contradictions and complexities. Kailash teaches through stillness, through the dance that happens when you stop moving, through the transformation that comes from accepting what is so completely that it becomes what could be. Fuji teaches through beauty, through form so perfect it transcends form, through the presence that emerges when something is completely itself, without trying to be anything else. Meru teaches through cosmology, through the recognition that you are not in the universe, but the universe is in you, that the same patterns repeat at every scale, that the mountain outside is the mountain inside. Sinai teaches through encounter, through the willingness to meet the divine directly, to receive the weight of law, to accept the responsibility of consciousness. Kunlun teaches through transcendence, through the possibility of going beyond the ordinary limitations of biology, time, death. And the Pyramid Mountains teach through sacrifice, through the recognition that maintaining consciousness requires investment, requires payment, requires the willingness to give something precious to receive something more precious. Together they teach that the sacred is not separate from the ordinary, but hidden within it, not distant, but immediate, not absent, but so present, we mistake it for absence. They teach that climbing is a form of prayer, that altitude is a state of consciousness, that mountains are the earth's way of reaching towards something it remembers from before it became earth, when it was star stuff, when it was the dream in the mind of whatever dreams universes into being. As the light grows stronger, as the dawn that has been approaching finally arrives, as you return from the journey that was not a journey, from the climbing that was not climbing, from the story that was not story, but invitation, initiation. Remember this: you carry these mountains with you now. They have taken root in your consciousness, have become part of your inner landscape, have created in you the altitudes necessary for perspective, for understanding, for the kind of seeing that only comes from height. When you open your eyes, and you will open them soon, returning to the horizontal world where most of life is lived, you will carry with you the memory of vertical possibilities, of the peaks that exist within you waiting to be climbed, of the gods that exist within you waiting to be acknowledged, of the immortal that exists within you waiting to be remembered. The mountains have taught you their secret, that ascending is really about descending into greater depth, that climbing outside is really about climbing inside, that the summit is not a place, but a state, not a destination, but a perspective, not an achievement, but a recognition of what you have always been. The sacred mountains where gods live are not somewhere else but right here, not in the past, but in the eternal now, not outside you, but within you. Waiting. They have always been waiting. They will always be waiting for you to remember, for you to return, for you to recognize that you are the mountain, you are the climber, you are the path between them. You are the gods that live at the summit. You are the pilgrim approaching with offerings. You are the offering itself. Sleep now if you haven't been sleeping. Dream now if you haven't been dreaming. Rest in the knowledge that you have made the journey, have climbed the unclimbable, have reached the unreachable, have become what you always were but forgot in order to have the joy of remembering. The mountains will be here when you wake, when you return, when you're ready to climb again. They are always here, always waiting, always calling to the part of you that knows the view. From the summit is worth any effort to reach it, even though the summit is where you started, where you've always been, where you can never leave, because you are it. It is you. And the separation was only a beautiful illusion that allowed the journey to happen. The gods are going to sleep now as the sun rises to take their place in the sky. They sleep in their mountains, in their temples, in the peaks of consciousness you've built within yourself through this night's traveling. They sleep, but they dream, and their dreams are your waking life, your daily experience, your ordinary existence that is secretly sacred, that is actually the dance of divinity, pretending to be human, pretending to be separate, pretending to be climbing when it has already arrived, has always been at the summit, has never left the holy ground where every step is sacred, where every breath is prayer, where every moment is the eternal now in which all the mountains exist, in which all the gods dance, in which you remember who you really are. As it was in the beginning, so it is now, so it will always be. The sacred mountains rising from the earth of consciousness, calling to the heaven of awareness, creating the possibility of ascent, that is really descent, of journey that is really arrival, of story that is really silence, of words that point beyond words, to the wordless truth that you are the mountain, you are the God that lives there. You are the pilgrim approaching with offerings. You are the offering. You are the fire that receives it. You are the smoke that rises to the sky. You are the sky that receives the smoke. You are the space that holds the sky. You are the consciousness that perceives the space. You are the mystery studying itself in the mirror of story, forever and always, world without end. Amen. Om. Thus it has been spoken. Thus it is. Thus it will always be. The mountains sleep now. The gods sleep now. You sleep now. But the journey continues in the place where sleeping and waking meet, where the eternal touches the temporal, where the sacred mountains rise forever in the landscape of your deepest self, where you are always climbing, always arriving, always discovering that the summit you sought was the ground you started from, transformed by the journey into holy ground, into the place where you remove your sandals and recognize that you have been walking on sacred earth all along, that every step has been a prayer, that every breath has been an offering, that every moment has been the moment of arrival at the place you never left, the summit that is everywhere, the temple that is everything, the God that is everyone, including you, especially you, always you, forever you, world without end, in the circular story that ends where it began. With you, here, now, always. Rest now. Rest in the knowing. Rest in the journey completed that is never complete. Rest in the climbing that continues in stillness. Rest in the mountains that rise within you. Rest in the gods that sleep within you. Rest in the immortal that dreams within you. Rest in the sacred that is you. Rest, rest, rest.